Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank you for joining us, and I'd like to welcome you to the Senior Thesis Exhibition Artist Talk with the group here. Tonight we have three artists. We have Dawn Clevenger, Helen Zellner, and Shania Stokley joining us. Tonight we're going to begin by asking a few questions to the artist, and then each of them are going to share their PowerPoint presentation or slideshow explaining some of their work a little bit more thoroughly. So tonight I'd like to start with Dawn. And Dawn, good evening, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about your work and more specifically, what was the look you're going for? Because it's such a unique look to it. Can you explain that a little bit?
I would describe my artwork as a sort of art nouveau. I have very strong anime influences, although I was also inspired by Gustav Klimt to use sort of my gold leafing, but instead, as a mixed media artist, I decided to go with something that I felt was easier to incorporate and went with a folded emerald paint.
Okay, so the leafing process, is that what you're saying? You're using the paint instead?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, you spoke a little bit about your media. Can you explain a little bit about kind of your process and how you actually create the work?
Sort of the mediums that I use are, I first have to lay down on like different layers of ink. So I have different gradients of black ink. So it's very grayscale. And then I go in after that's completely dry with watercolor, and I like to touch things up with Copic markers and polychromos pencils. And as I mentioned before, the gold enamel paint.
Excellent. So it's a layering process of lots of different mediums, some kind of waterproof, so whenever you go back to the watercolor, interesting. So what kind of inspired you to make this work? I know you're going to speak more specifically about it later, but everybody's interested.
My general inspiration for making this art was to work through some personal feelings and to really lay down what I'm thinking and how I feel on the paper as I'm creating it.
Interesting. I think art is always one of those outlets to kind of express yourself. You spoke to Klimt as an influence using that kind of gold approach. Who are your other influences or sources?
One of my other sources, his name is Hugh Niagen. He also does a lot of female portraiture, like I do female portraiture for the most part. And his work heavily inspired me through just the concept and thought of having these women suspended in sort of like time and space. Often there's not a time of day in my artwork, and I feel like he was my inspiration for incorporating that.
Interesting. So Korean-based artists.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So those are two non-American influences, which is always nice to kind of get a world perspective a little bit. So what would you say would be, or I guess more importantly, did you have any issues coming up with a theme? And if you did, how did you kind of work through that?
As you said before, well influences, I really wanted to do a tarot deck, a full tarot deck of nature, and I have 12 currently, but I wanted to do a full 22. And I wanted to do them based off of different mythologies all around the world, but then I decided to work more personal, which let me settle on these characters that you can find in the King James Version of the Bible.
Interesting, kind of blending the two items. I'm kind of curious, as an outsider looking in, what are you trying to communicate? What do you want the viewer to kind of feel or experience while looking at your work?
I wanted my work to be more confrontational. A lot of my characters are looking directly at you, and the ones that are not often are, well, all of my characters are exposed in some way. You can see their collarbones, their legs, their stomachs, sort of making the person view this and think about themselves.
So exposing themselves physically in a bit. Okay, interesting. And I think that sometimes applying those kind of things and imagery can make the viewer feel slightly uncomfortable. What do you feel like you did well or something that maybe you could even improve upon?
I feel like I did very well conceptually. I feel like I had really strong ideas about what I wanted to do. But I feel like I struggled heavily with the sizing of my paper, with being smaller than I am typically used to. And I really feel like I need to work more on my anatomy and bringing across my ideas.
Interesting. Yeah, by changing the scale does change how you work with different mediums, which is interesting. So kind of in that same area, what did you learn about yourself as an artist or through this process of making this body of work?
I realized that as an artist who works with a lot of wet and then dry and have to wait for a lot of like drying time, that I should not be rushing, that I really need to let my ink and my water like completely dry before trying to go in. It's taught me a lot of patience.
Excellent. I think that's something all artists can kind of take into consideration. Um, and allowing things to dry is difficult, but sometimes by working on multiple things at once kind of can alleviate some of that pressure. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Don. I know you're going to talk a little bit more in a bit about your presentation and work more specifically. All right, let's move on to Helen. Good evening, Helen.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. Can you kind of expand a little bit about your work? Tell us a little bit about what does it look like and how does it feel and what was your overall kind of goal for your work?
I have a series of large-scale illustrations that kind of depict a relationship between a girl and her mental state. So overall theme was kind of showing the interaction between what she's feeling and what it's like actually doing to her. So it's like a physical representation of a mental struggle.
Interesting. And I mean, it's powerful work also. Can you explain a little bit about your process and how you're using the medium more specifically?
So I work with ink, like entirely, it's primarily ink. So what I would do is I sketched them out, of course, like a very light pencil. I did all the outside line work, and then kind of added some small details. And then I did, like a bit of cross hatching to add value. I did the hair, and then after everything was completed, like line work wise, I went over with a wash and I did a few layers of that, waited between the dried, and kind of really experimented with the values because I don't really use wash a lot. So I would water down the ink and then go over it until it dried, see if I was comfortable with the shade it could use. If not, I would go darker.
Excellent. So what do you feel like you learned through that process? It seems like a timely process. What did you feel like you learned through that?
I kind of learned to just go at my own pace and not be scared of the medium. Because when I was using the ink washes, I was kind of scared because once you put it on there, it doesn't go back. You can always go darker, but you can't go lighter. So I just kind of had to teach myself that, if it does end up, in a way I don't like.
So in that same kind of vein, what do you feel like you did really well?
The overall line work. Like I feel like technically I was pretty okay with that. I really like how on a smaller scale than I started with, I was able to include some of the same details that I first started out with.
Which is a challenge, kind of in the same way. Whenever you increase the scale or kind of minimize the scale of something, different problems start to arise. So you spoke a little bit about this, but for our audience, I kind of want you to kind of expand upon it maybe a little bit right now. So what was the overall theme? You talked about some of the subject matter related to it, but what was your overall theme?
The entire theme for this body of work is a personal experience with depression. It is a visual representation of how my mind felt. So I kind of felt, like bullied by my own self. So that's what that is.
So how did you decide how to visualize that? Because it's such a mental thing. So how did you figure out how to depict that?
I took a couple of I really thought about how I felt during that time when it was the most heavy, and I just came up with like a couple of phrases that were like interactions of how they would act with each other, and then I kind of sketched them out because the main goal is for them to physically interact the entire time.
Very good. I mean, because it's such a personal story or personal experience, was it difficult for you to kind of present this to the public?
At one point, yes, because I kind of felt like it was going in a place that was too deep. 'Cause it's kind of a subject that I haven't really touched on, not even with like close family and friends and stuff like that. So that's kind of why I made a character that wasn't entirely, it wasn't entirely me. So it was like a self-portrait. So I made an ambiguous person, so it wasn't too personal.
And, because, I mean, this is such a heavy subject and can relate to a lot of people, I'm sure that your influences for this work kind of pulled through some of these things, or maybe stylistic decisions even. Who were those influences then, or maybe sources you were pulling from?
One of the main ones is the Golden Age illustration. So when I started drawing, I was really inspired by illustration from the 20s, editorial illustration from the 50s and 60s. Illustrators like Charles Dana Gibson. We did editorial illustrations of women. I found that really interesting. And
Interesting. Any real fine art inspiration, or did you take a complete tangent and thought you'd go kind of this more editorial or advertisement kind of route?
no,
No fine art.
yeah, I just kind of felt like it didn't really fit in.
Interesting. All right, thank you very much. Last but not least, we have Shania Stokley. Shania, welcome.
Hey,
Got a few questions for you.
okay.
Can you explain what was your theme to your overall your paintings here, and where you're pulling some inspiration from?
So my pieces are neon anatomical expression. It's supposed to be like a duality between my relationship with my family and emphasis on my father and daughter relationship. And yeah.
So you spoke to this kind of neon anatomy kind of paintings. Can you explain a little bit about your process and mediums you used? And
The mediums I use, I started off with is the modeling paste that's on the realistic side. It's like a white paste that you put on, and then I have to like put extra paint on top of that. And then the neon part, I had to work with a black light and like go in with different colors of neon to make sure it light up and go, because the neon side does glow. And then the flowers I picked were, I looked up what different flowers mean, and I chose the ones that went right with the body parts that I picked, the organ that I chose.
interesting. So I'm sure you're going to explain a little bit more, and I think once the viewers have an opportunity to see some of the actual images of your work, it'll kind of make a little bit more sense. But before that, did you have any trouble kind of coming up with this concept? It seems like it started quite a few months ago, last semester, with your first piece. So I'm kind of curious about where you pulled your inspiration from and how that kind of transpired to what we're seeing here now.
Well, when I first started last semester, I didn't do the neon part, and then I just started noticing neon, so I wanted to try it, and I tried it with the anatomical and the neon, and I put it together, and I liked it, so I wanted to base my pieces around that area. So that's why I chose to do the neon and the anatomical. I mean, the neon and the anatomical part together.
So you spoke to this kind of duality of images, right? These kind of, even though they're relating to each other, they seem so visually different. So what challenges did you have in maybe coming up with compositions and even the arrangement of objects on the panels? Because each one of them are kind of displayed in such a unique way. What was that about?
The challenges I had was, I want to say, the neon part, because some colors wasn't glowing under the black light, so I had to go back and forth and then put in the color behind the realistic part, because I didn't want to have the outline around it, so I had to keep going in on back to back. And then the flowers, I had to put a lot of details, and that took forever. So I mean, that's the challenges I think I had.
How did you overcome those challenges? What do you feel like
I had to overcome them. I just had to push myself to keep doing it, because I needed to finish the work. So I just pushed myself to continue to finish it.
I think that's a great answer. I think most of us just, as artists, we just have to kind of push through to get to that other side. So how do you feel like you could improve these, or can you improve them? Or what do you feel like through this process you've learned that you could eventually maybe in future work?
I think to improve them, I would, if I had more time to like do besides my daily life, I would have more time to finish stuff and add stuff that I wanted to add. And I think that's what I wanted, time.
Time is something we all need more of, right? What do you feel like you learned through this process of using these very specific mediums, right? You're talking about, and I assume your references are quite diverse too, because you're looking at such a.
Right, I did have 3 different type of influences: Bruce Nolan, Ed Hardy, and Jim Warren, which is a surrealistic artist. And Bruce Nolan worked with neon and sculpture, and he worked with a lot of stuff. And Ed Hardy was a tattoo artist.
Yeah, very diverse group of artists, which is really interesting that you're kind of pulling inspiration from each one of those. Other than just the neon work that Bruce Nauman did, was there anything specifically that he was doing that really kind of grabbed your attention?
Yeah, I think it's just the neon work and how he made them work together and how they came up with different stories and they did different things, political stuff and fictional stuff.
I think it's really interesting how such a diverse group of artists throughout our history, even maybe fine art sense, can inspire a group of women in the 21st century to make a body of work that is so diverse. So I think that's a good place to kind of stop, and I would like to invite Dawn to go and share her slideshow. And
My Rebellion Through Tarot is a set of 12 cards from the Major Arcana. This set of illustrations that I have created incorporates women that can be found in the King James Bible. Tarot cards are viewed as taboo because they can be used for divination. The women featured on the cards are held in different regards due to a biblical sense of a woman's virtue. I chose to place them side by side on tarot cards as equals. The combination of the two is a result of my disagreement towards the teachings of these two things specifically and the hypocrisy of the way I was raised in my household. Through my artwork, I want to explore the teachings of my grandmother about the King James Version of the Bible in my household and how that made me feel. I specifically took issue with the views on women in the Bible being written from a male-only perspective and how that point of view affected the way I thought through my developmental years. The format of the Major Arcana Tarot cards will be used to express my own views and as a marker that I no longer believe the way I was taught, since tarot cards were specifically forbidden. Next. The Chariot card. The meaning is a powerful figure that sits in a swift chariot, pulled unusually by two sphinx or horses. The figure is crowned and holds a sword or wand. The chariot is a card about overcoming conflicts, moving forward in a positive direction. One needs to keep going on, and through sheer hard work and commitment, they will be victorious. Depicted on the card is Huldah the prophetess. She was the one who encouraged King Joshua to continue his program of renovating the Holy Temple in Jerusalem and reintroducing the service of God there. Next. The empress sits on a throne wearing a starry crown, holding a scepter in one hand. The scepter is representative of her power over life. Her crown has 12 stars representing her dominance over the year, and her throne sits amidst of a field of grain representing her dominion over growing things. The empress is traditionally associated with maternal influence. It is the card if you are hoping to start a family. She can represent the creation of life, romance, art, or new business. Depicted on the card is Leah. Leah is Jacob's wife. It was not at all a happy one. So lonely was she that even the Lord took notice of it and blessed her with many children as consolation. Still, despite Rachel's infertility, Jacob still favored Rachel. Next. The fool is usually depicted as a beggar or a vagabond. The Fool card represents things like new beginnings, having faith in the future, being inexperienced, having beginner's luck, and in most decks, the Fool is depicted in some kind of near accident waiting to happen. I went with my composition where the Fool is smelling the flowers, not realizing that they are about to walk off a cliff. And there is a dog off to the side barking in warning, and you never just know if the beggar's luck actually kicked in. Here is the story I chose to belong to this card. In the Bible, there was a woman named Agar. She is sometimes only referred to as Adam's concubine and the mother of his firstborn child, Ishmael. Agar was maltreated and cast out by Sarah over the fear of her son overtaking Isaac, who was Abraham's child with his wife Sarah. Hagar was said to have originally been given to Abraham by Sarah, as she was a slave turned into a maid. At the time, Sarah had not been able to conceive, but unfortunately that later changed. The story of Hagar demonstrates that survival is possible even under the harshest conditions. Here she is, a woman cast out of her home with a child, have nothing done wrong, and other than what was described as arrogance. But to me, it was clearly a desire to be treated as an equal. And even if that was the case, alone should not have been enough to throw a woman and her child into the desert. Agar was given a promise from God about her son and had maintained her faith in God throughout her ordeal. And in many ways, the story of Agar lines up with the meaning of the Fool card. Next. The Hierophant is seen seated on a throne between two pillars, symbolizing law and liberty, or obedience and disobedience. She wears a triple crown, and the keys to heaven are at her feet. Hierophant stands for tradition and convention. It can represent marriage in an arranged setup. It can also mean a teacher or a counselor who will help in learning or education. Depicted on the card is Miriam, the older sister of Moses and Aaron. She was a prophetess and first appeared in the books of Exodus. Scripture describes her alongside of Moses and Aaron as delivering the Jews from exile in Egypt. Just as Moses led the men out of Egypt and taught them the Torah, so too Miriam led the women and taught them the Torah. Next. The figure in the Justice card holds two objects, a scale in one hand as a symbol of balance and a sword in the other, to exemplify the preservation of that equilibrium, even by means of force. The Justice card indicates that the fairest decision will be made. Justice is a sword that cuts through a situation and will not be swayed by outer beauty when deciding what is fair and just. Depicted on the card is Rispa, one of Saul's concubines. Rispa would protect the bodies on top of the rock of Gibeah for 5 months, ensuring that they would not be eaten by beasts and birds of prey. They were eventually taken down and buried with the bones of Saul and Jonathan. Only once both restitutions had been made for Saul's betrayal of the Gibeonites, an olive branch extended to Rispa and the house of Saul. By giving Saul's son the honor of burial with their father, did God respond to the plea of the land and end the famine. Next. Here depicted is the Judgment card. This card was the first card made in this set and ties in together many ideas behind this set of illustrations. The Judgment card normally depicts an angel, possibly Gabriel, and is depicted blowing a great trumpet. A group of humans of grayish complexion stand, arms spread, hands reaching, and are apparently emerging from the graves. There is a massive wave coming towards them to signify that no one can escape judgment. My composition is composed similar to this, except for instead of people coming out of coffins, I decided to just have the hands reaching outwards. This card is often referred to as a time of resurrection and awakening, a time when a period of our lives come to an absolute end, making way for new dynamic beginnings. On the Judgment card, I have depicted Eve. Most people know how this story goes. Eve was created by God by making her from the rib of Adam, to be Adam's companion. She succumbs to the serpent's temptation and eats the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and she shares the fruit with Adam. He was not forced and also knew he was not to eat it, and as a result, the first humans were expelled from the Garden of Eden, held by equally accountable by God. The most common thing about stories in the Bible is that the story is never told by the person who it happened to. I simply would put what she did was a trade. Upon eating the fruit, she was lost to the garden and could no longer live forever, and instead we are everything else around us today, the good, the bad, and many would say that is life as we know it. And Eve made that judgment to eat the fruit and was awakened to these things, and even though her life in the garden came to an end, she made her way for herself and eventually us. And that fits within the meaning of the Judgment card. This also ties in with why the biblical female figures on these tarot cards are loosely dressed in robes, clearly naked underneath. If after eating the fruit, they felt ashamed of their bodies and they covered themselves, why is that in itself not considered the sin? The human body is not created clothed. If we were meant to be covered from head to toe, then we would be born with clothing stitched onto our bodies. This is a nod to the fact that I was taught women are supposed to, or expected to, have our nipples covered while men can go topless, and that female body is considered only a sexual thing to hide, and I disagree with the way of that thinking taught in my household. But I agree that since we are all aware that we cannot control the way others think or see, that there is still somewhat of a slim need of modesty. Next. The image of the magician shows a figure who is standing in front of a powerful altar with tools that represent all four directions and the four suits in the tarot. When a magician appears in a spread, it points to talent, capabilities, resource at the person's disposal to succeed. The message is to tap into one's full potential rather than holding back, especially when there is a need for transformation. Depicted on the card is Judith. Tells of a Jewish widow, Judith, who uses her beauty and charms to destroy a general and save Israel from oppression. She gains his trust and proceeds to decapitate him as he is drunk. She returns his head to her fearful countrymen. Having lost their leader, the enemies disperse and Israel is saved. Depicted in usually decapitating Holofernes in defined clothing. Unusually with black or red hair, but since I am working in grayscale, I have decided to make her robe red instead. Next. The world. Oh my. The meaning of the moon card is of illusion and deception, and therefore often suggests a time when something is not as it appears to be. Perhaps a misunderstanding on your part or a truth that you cannot admit to yourself. In alignment with this is the story of Dinah, the episode of her violation by a man named Skemet, the son of a Canaanite and a prince, and the subsequent vengeance of her brother Simon and Levi. Dinah truly loved him and was seduced by him, not raped. Her brothers would have deceived them and his father by agreeing to their terms for Dinah's hand in marriage. However, this led to the circumcision and eventual death of all the men in the city. It foreshadows later happenings and prophecies further along in Genesis, dealing with the two violent brothers. Next. When the star card appears, you are likely to find yourself feeling inspired. It brings renewed hope and faith in a sense that you were truly blessed by the universe at this time. Depicted on the card is Esther. She is chosen by the Persian king for her beauty. It is responsible for the reversal of a king's plan to kill all the Jews in the kingdom of Persia. Instead, she foils the plan and receives permission from the king to have the Jews kill all of their enemies instead. This event is celebrated by the tradition of Purim. Esther's position in a male court mirrors that of the Jews in a Gentile world, with the threat of danger ever present below and seemingly calm surface. The story of Esther is a rhetoric of exile and empowerment for the millennia, and has notably shaped the discourse of marginalized people such as Jews, women, and African Americans. Next. This card is Temperance. It is normally shown depicting a person pouring liquid from one receptacle into the other. In many decks, the person is a winged person or an angel, and usually female or androgynous. It stands with 1 foot on the water and 1 foot on the land. This card indicates that you should learn to bring about balance, patience, and moderation into your life. You should take the middle road, avoiding extremes, and maintain a sense of calm. The story behind this card is that of Mary Magdalene. She traveled with Jesus as one of his followers and was a witness to his crucifixion and its aftermath. Held support in his ministry out of their resources, indicating that she was probably relatively wealthy. Mary Magdalene is a witness not only to Jesus' execution, but also was present at his burial. She is also known in some Christian traditions as the apostle to the apostles. Mary was a sinful woman, but eventually repented and became one of Jesus' closest disciples, and she was the only one to truly understand his teachings. Next. The image of the tower card is powerful, depicting a solid tower being struck by lightning and fire crawling out from the small windows at its top. The tower is commonly interpreted as the meaning of danger, crisis, destruction, and liberation. It is associated with a sudden, unforeseen change. I have changed the composition of this quite a bit to go with the person depicted on the card. Edith witnessed the destruction of Sodom. As she looked back at Sodom, even after she was forbade not to look, she was then turned into a pillar of salt. She is not named in the Bible, but is often called Ado or Edith in some Jewish traditions. Next. The world card often depicts a naked woman hovering or dancing above the earth, holding a staff in each hand, surrounded by a green wraith being watched by various creatures. The world represents an ending to a cycle of life, a pause in life before the next big cycle beginning with the Fool. It is an indicator of a major and inexplorable change of a tectonic breath. Depicting on this card, I have decided to place Mary. She is considered to be a saint of the religion and even prayed to in the Catholic Church. She holds significant meaning for the Christian religion across the board. Next.
Okay. Neon anatomical expressions is 5 large-scale acrylic paintings on canvas. The pieces are focused around 5 major organs: ears, heart, lungs, brain, and kidneys. Each organ represents what they mean to me. The ears are how I feel I perceive I was heard, and the heart illustrates my change and growth as a person. The lungs advocates for how I want me and my father relationship to work together. The brain shows my emotion from anger, from lack of father bond, determination, motherly, and depression. And the kidneys express getting rid of waste, toxic friends, and people in my life. The paintings will show realistic organs anatomy with a surrealistic twist with nature, and will introduce a neon tubing look with acrylic paint. My senior thesis would depict my life and relationship with my family, with emphasis on my father and daughter relationship. These pieces would be very expressive, shedding light on my built-up anger and bottled up emotions. My lack of father and daughter relationship has played a role in my self-esteem issues, uncommon behavior, trust issues, romantic relationship problems, and lack of patience. Although the lack of father figure has caused problems and issues with my life, it has also made me stronger. Each piece shows duality of relationships with realism and neon. The black light shows the fluorescent substance on the neon side, giving it a glow effect. The neon side represents the fun, childlike behavior and points out how I want my family and father to treat how I wanted my family and father to treat me when I was younger. The realism side represents me today and how I feel like I had to grow up and mature at a young age and how I had to be strong. The split and the splits that splits up each organ has has flowers with a soft colored background, which represents my safe space. This space is the space in my life where I can be free. The lungs are organs that work together to help you breathe. These organs is the only one without flowers in the split. This organ does not have flowers because it represents the disconnection between me and my father. We don't work together like lungs. The flowers and the paintings off have meaning and shed light on my motherly characteristics of being loving, devoted, dedicated, protective, caring, nurturing, understanding, compassionate, caring, maternal, affectionate, and so on. All the paintings are surrounded with negative space because of the emptiness and loneliness I felt behind closed doors. Neon tubing is a fragile glass that is bent into different shapes, filled up with different gases at a low pressure, and it could be broken at any point during the process, and even after it once it's done. I chose neon because I look at myself as neon too, very fragile, and always been in my back for everyone but myself. I put pressure on myself to help others and do for others, leaving no space for me. Although the neon part isn't neon tubing made of glass, it is an illusion created with acrylic paint to showcase an idea of a real neon tube. Next. So this is my piece is titled A Thin Line Between. It shows a heart, the realistic heart at the top with the neon at the bottom. The neon is blue neon, and then the flowers in the middle represent change, transformation, new beginning, rebirth, pride, determination, beauty, and emotional pain of and physical difficulties. So this painting is supposed to be about my change as a person and what I overcome as my growth in today's life. Next. This is the long piece. This piece is supposed to be about my father and daughter relationship. And as you see, the flowers are not in the middle, as I said before. I didn't put flowers in the middle because it's supposed to show the disconnection between me and my father. And as you see, the realistic side has the modeling paste behind it, and the black is the color that's mixed with the black is purple to give it that like purple black look color, and then the neon color is yellow. Next. This is the earpiece. As you can see, it's giving a representation of the yin yang symbol, and the neon is orange, and you can see it's the other side of the ear is flipped upside down, and the flowers is the dandelions. The dandelions represent fun-like behavior, youthful joy, and surviving challenges. It also can mean a wish, making a wish. Next. This is my brain piece. This is titled uh, Mentally Gone, and these have hydrangeas in the middle. And the hydrangeas are representation of emotions, and this is a piece that's supposed to be stating my emotions and how I went through different obstacles of pain and being in the shadows, not expressing how I feel, and that's it. Next. My kidney piece is not on the slide, but the kidney piece is it's the same thing of realistic on one side, and then it's a purple neon on the other side, and they have it's inside is yellow pastel color with weeds coming out the bottom part. I chose weed because weeds are used as something that you want to cut out your garden, and I want it to be something that I'm getting rid of, and that piece is titled Toxins, and that's it.
What she does is a series of large-scale ink illustrations expressing a physical relationship between a girl and her mental disorder. For most of my life, I've always had trouble expressing myself, and I've battled with the fear of judgment since early childhood. Watching cartoons and reading graphic novels in my teens helped me cope with this intense inability to properly relay my feelings, and I began drawing with the constant need to express any thought in mind. Painting and other forms of visual media never radiated the same inviting energy of storytelling that illustration did for me, and I abandoned those practices early in my college career. Still unable to truly express myself as I got more comfortable with illustration, I left out the use of irises and pupils in the eyes of my subjects, hoping to prevent the eternal fear of judgment from halting my creative process. This fear prevailed, however, and it sent me into an intense state of depression halfway through my college career, making it difficult to create, maintain my studies, and feel happy with life. Throughout my personal journey as an artist exploring the vast uses for ink, I have also recently found that methods of illustration, such as comics, graphic novels, and editorial work, are not regarded as highly in the world of fine arts as painting or sculpture would be. The idea that illustration is a less cultivated form of art when compared to visual media such as painting or sculpture gives off the implication that it is unable to cover more serious themes. By using personal experiences with mental illness, more specifically depression, in conjunction with the more simple and idealized themes of illustration, my thesis will explore the controversy around the type of narratives best suited for illustration as a medium. It will express my personal feelings with depression as well as challenge the storytelling nature illustration is best known for. By capturing my experience through a struggling relationship between the physical manifestation of depression and an imagined character meant to represent my emotional self in a series of large-scale ink drawings, I will spark a conversation about not only mental health, but the implied divide between media and contemporary art. Next. Okay, so this is the second piece in my body of work. It is called Answering for Me, and it is one of the 4 pieces that show a physical struggle between a imaginary character and the manifestation of her depression. And so in this particular piece, the interaction is the disorder answering for the girl, and she's left unable to speak. The reason I chose this kind of interaction between them is because whenever I was in an intense state of depression, I felt like I wasn't speaking for myself, that I let my negative feelings speak for me, and that I didn't actually, communicate what I was actually trying to feel to somebody. So I left a lot of how I was feeling out whenever I was talking to my friends or family and just kind of played it off. Next. This is the last piece in my work. It is called What We Are, and it is the total absolvement of the depression and the girl in one body. So after all the physical interactions that I have shown, and after like the introduction of the character, at the very end, you kind of see that the depression grows and that she's not only interacting with her, but she is now part of her. So now they are one. Instead of being the depression and the girl, they are now one person. Next. This is the third piece. It is called Taking From Me. And again, it's one of those physical interactions that I mentioned earlier. And it's kind of like the representation of, I felt like my depression and my negative feelings were taken from me actively in my life. Like it took away things I wanted to enjoy, took away the way I wanted to feel, the way I wanted to express myself. I felt like that was all kind of snatched from me and I couldn't do anything about it. Next. This is the fourth piece called Holding Me Back. And of course, I did feel held back a lot of times, especially in my last semester when it kind of hit a lot. I felt like I was just there and that I couldn't, do everything to the best of my abilities. And this is that representation of that. Next. And this is the first piece in the series, and it's called Who I Am. And I kind of positioned the first and the 6 pieces to be more portrait style so that you get like a introduction and a final, seeing of who this girl is and who she is in the beginning. She's okay in the beginning. She's all right. she's there, you know, and the depression is there as well, but it's not as large. So in comparison to the last piece, she is just here. It's with her, but then it kind of grows on her and it attacks her and it becomes her. So that's kind of what this entire body of work is. It's kind of like a progression of having this, you know, illness and dealing with it and fighting with it. And at one point, it was who I was at some point. So, that's all.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Now that we've heard from our artist, I would like to invite everybody on our Facebook Live event to ask any questions to the artist, and we'll try to get those answered. I'm sure that you have many questions at this point, so we'll take a few minutes to take those questions. I do see lots of comments in the post, a lot of obviously positive comments saying great work to everybody, and definitely talking about specifics of the art. I think that we have a great body of work, and I'm curious to see, I see more posts popping up now. For Don here, yes. Let me take this. It says, question for Don. Will you use feathers on your angels? Or why don't you use feathers on your angels? Sorry.
Okay, the two cards that I think they're referring to is the Judgment card and the Temperance card. Traditionally, these two things were supposed to have angels on them. The reason why I didn't use feathers is because I didn't want them to be recognized as angels. I wanted these to appear to be women and not some other heavenly being. So therefore, I opted out of using the feathers, so you didn't immediately recognize them as well.
Great, thank you. We do have a question here for Shania, asking, Shania, why did you use paint instead of actually neon, or actual neon?
So I wanted to use paint instead of neon because I wanted to create an illusion of neon instead of using the sculptures of tubing and neon. I mean, of glass and doing the pressure and all the glass, all the gases and stuff. So I wanted to create an illusion.
Create an illusion of it instead of actually producing it. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay. There's a question for, they want to know, what is the favorite pieces from each artist?
My favorite piece is the heart. That's the title of thing on 20.
Great. Don?
Is it okay if I have three?
Start with one.
Okay. I guess my favorite pieces have to be the judgment card. I know I talked about that one a lot because it really ties into the whole concept of the set parts.
Great. And Helen?
I'd have to say my favorite one is my last one, called Part of Me. I just really like how it was like the total combination of the entire body work. It's just a whole little something like
There is another question here, asking Helen, what was the purpose of them being black and white?
I chose black and white because I feel like color is kind of a distraction at times. And also because I wanted to make the character as ambiguous as possible in terms of race, like, even if it is like my personal experience, I kind of want other people to have a sense that they can relate to it, and it's not just a thing for black girls or a thing for white girls, it's just like a person going through it.
Excellent. There's a question, I assume this is for Shania. Will your paintings actually glow in the dark?
Yes, the neon side, they do glow in the black light. They don't glow when you cut the light off, but as soon as you put the black light on, they do glow.
Great. So there was some kind of specialty paint that you used?
Yes, black light painting, neon black light painting.
All right, great, thank you. The question is for Dawn. Why do you use such little color in your paintings?
Okay. I use such little color in certain places because I wanted it to act as like a focal point and draw your eye to what I consider the main subject would be the women in the painting. So a lot of the robes are the only place you can find color in the composition.
And so I just to draw interest to the subject matter, excellent. Another question for Shania. Did the artistic process help with going on with what's in your relationships?
As of now, no, I don't think it has helped it right now, but I mean, time will tell. But no, not right now.
Excellent. Question for everyone. How do you deal with those who make suggestions that creations be less expressive and more mainstream? Interesting question.
Okay, I'll answer this one first. When I get that kind of suggestion, or like even, it comes more of the question of why do I do illustration and not, fine art? And I kind of wanted to explore that more because I had to ask myself, well, why isn't, illustration or something that's more like a cartoon style, why couldn't that be fine art? Or why couldn't it be more expressive? It kind of felt like a challenge, and it kind of felt insulting at one point. So I was just like, how do I take this and kind of make an intense body work out of it?
Excellent. Ladies?
I feel like my artwork is right up there with the illustrative qualities that Helen was talking about. It's, I never really looked at sort of the cartoons or, these sort of cartoon illustrations as anything less than. It never occurred to me, like, oh, well, I have to do, these traditional realistic paintings. I really feel like this represents more of who I am, and I want to stay true to that.
So what I think I just take everybody's constructive criticism and then I just, take it in, but always go with how I feel and what I think about my own art. So, I mean, if they don't like it, then, I can't force them to like it. So, it's my art. I take it how I want to take it, and I draw it, I paint it, and paint it how I want to paint it.
So I guess that kind of leads me to the question, since that looks like, there's one more. I'll wait and hold my thoughts for a moment. Helen, are you open to making art for others and not just for expressing your own feelings or yourself?
At this point in my career, I I would say yes and no, but more so on the no side, because when I really got into doing art in college, it was like a personal expression. Because I guess that was kind of like the only way I could express myself. But later on in my career, probably after college, well, definitely after college, I would be open to it.
Definitely. And I think that's a good segue for my question. Since you've been working on this body of work for basically the entire semester, and kind of leading up to this in semesters previously, can you kind of explain your feeling now that you're kind of getting closer to the finish line? Do you feel like there's this weight lifted off, and through this process, like what did you really feel like you learned about constructing a cohesive body of work and displaying it in a beautiful gallery setting like this? Don, would you like?
I never thought that I would see my art hanging up in a gallery, to be honest. I never expected to make money from it either. I went into art solely because it's just a form that I feel most accurately I can represent myself and express myself. That changed the more I learned, and I feel like this program has really opened my eyes to the importance of having your art hung in the gallery. And it really makes me feel like this artwork is professional. Like I am a professional artist, seeing it hung there on the wall.
Good answer. I like that a lot. Helen, how does that make you feel? This whole process.
It's definitely a process. At the beginning of the semester, I kind of went into it, and even last semester, I kind of went into it thinking that, oh, I create this body of work, I kind of explain myself, boom, it's up there, it's when I got into it, and when we started talking about, like the part of the abstract and concept of like technique and how all these things have to be one unit, it did get a little rough, and it was kind of a struggle. And seeing as how when I did come into this major, there were a lot of parts about art that I didn't know existed, such as like you had to have, like there was a formal language to art, and there are formal ways to explain that other than, oh, I like this. So it's pretty, I kind of took on that and used it for my thesis. But overall, I would say that the process has been like really rewarding. And like Don said, it is kind of a good feeling to just like look at the wall and see my work up there. There's definitely a lot that I would take from this experience and apply it if I ever do like show my work again. So yeah, that's really
Well, hopefully you do, and that's good to hear that you've enjoyed the process and kind of feel proud of it in the end. Shania?
So this process for me has been really hard. Had a lot of stress, and it was real stressful, but I was going through these sessions where I didn't know how to express myself through the art and know how to explain it to someone else to know what I was doing. So I was having a hard time, telling them I want to do this and not letting them accept it. Like they wanted more and more and more, and I was having a hard time dealing with that. So that process for me was hard, but the outcome was great. I'm glad I finished and did everything that I wanted to do, and you're right, it is rewarding, and I'm glad it's the finish line. I'm glad it's over.
I do want to clarify, this is the finish line of your undergrad
Yeah,
experience, right? You're still going to continue to make art.
Yeah.
It is a stressful process of working really hard, and hopefully we can explain to some of the viewers that are maybe not artists and just maybe family and friends that this is a really difficult undertaking, and it takes a lot of hard work to not only produce the work, but to be able to talk about it and using the vocabulary and thinking in a different way. It's really it is a difficult process.
Yeah.
With that being said, I believe. Okay. Oh yeah, I see. Dawn, do you see yourself doing commissions in the future?
I'm doing commissions now.
Okay.
But yes, in the future, as long as like some personal thing pops up, I'm always looking for commissions. I love doing art, and that makes me else happy. Doing my art and get paid for it. I'm always open to take commissions.
I think that's a great perspective to have. Um, is there another question? I think that, Leilani, a question for everyone. What was the hardest part of the whole process of creating your work of art?
For me, it was, I want to say all of it, the neon and the realism side. It was real hard for me, especially doing all the detail and going back in and saying, oh, no, I got to add this part in there. And it was just, that was difficult for me.
Good. Helen?
Aside from the work itself, framing my work was probably the hardest part. That was the part that kept me up at like 6 o'clock in the morning because I've never framed my work before. And so this is the first time I had to learn how to do it basically overnight. It's a really trying process.
I agree. Don?
Honestly, I feel like it had to have been motivational because I really do understand Helen's work because a lot of us do suffer from depression and anxiety, and it was just hard some days to get up and try to meet that deadline, make sure that I have the artwork done and ready to hang up. I feel like that was the biggest struggle.
And I agree with you. I think that that's a good metaphor for life, right? Sometimes life can beat you down, so it's nice to kind of progress through and find that finish line. It's great. I think that's all the questions, and I want to thank all of our Facebook Live viewers, family, and friends coming to visit us. Congratulations, ladies! Great show. And at this time, we're going to take a little tour around the studio, or excuse me, around the gallery, and see each work of art kind of up close, and probably get a little better scale of it also. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. Good night.